The air in the Memphis recording studio hung thick with the smell of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and a faint, exciting tang of electricity. Outside, the Tennessee sun beat down, but inside, under the harsh studio lights, it felt like another world. Elvis Presley, the king himself, leaned back in his chair, a slight frown creasing his brow. His golden voice had just laid down another track, a real foot-tapper, the kind the Colonel loved, the kind the fans screamed for. And sure, Elvis loved it too, in a way. He loved the energy, the roar of the crowd, the way a good rock and roll tune could make your hips sway without even thinking about it. But lately, something felt a little hollow. He was 20, something at the absolute peak of his fame. Records flew off the shelves faster than they could print them. Movies were lined up. Girls screamed his name wherever he went, and boys slicked back their hair trying to be just like him. He had everything a young man could dream of, and yet there was a quiet ache, a yearning for something more in his music. "That's a winner, Eam." Scotty Moore, his guitarist, grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Bill Black nodded, thumping his bass. DJ Fontana, behind the drum kit, gave a thumbs up. They were his boys, his band, the heart of the sound that had changed the world. "Yeah," Elvis mumbled, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "It's good. Real good." He didn't sound convinced, pushed himself up and walked over to the playback machine, listening again to the upbeat tune full of catchy hooks and a driving beat. It was destined for the top 10, no doubt, but it didn't stir his soul like some of the old blues songs he used to sing or the gospel hymns his mama loved. He remembered sitting on the porch as a boy listening to the world around him, the wind through the trees, the distant train whistle. He remembered the feeling when a song truly reached inside him and pulled out something real. Lately it felt like he was just performing, putting on a show. The Colonel, his manager, Tom Parker, always talked about numbers, about sales, about keeping the machine running, and Elvis understood that he had a family to support, people who depended on him. "We need another single for the summer," Colonel Parker's voice boomed from the control booth, cutting through Elvis's thought. The Colonel was a large man, always wearing a suit even in the heat, and a shrewd glint in his eye. Something bright, something to make the youngsters dance. Elvis sighed inwardly. He respected the Colonel. The man had taken him from obscurity to global superstardom. But sometimes Elvis felt like a product, a shiny new car on a showroom floor, expected to drive a certain way. He wanted to drive off-road, explore new paths, even if they were a little bumpy. Later that evening, back at Graceland, the grand mansion that was now his home, Elvis sat alone in the living room. The house was usually bustling with family and friends, but tonight he craved solitude. The records on his turntable spun blues and gospel sounds that felt like home. He picked up his guitar, idly strumming a few chords. He wasn't a knocketer himself. Not really, but he knew a good song when he heard one. He knew a true song, one that spoke truth. He thought about the millions of people who bought his records, who came to his concerts. They loved the show, the excitement, the wild energy. But did they ever wonder about the man behind the sneer in the flashy suit? Did they ever feel the quiet moments of longing he felt? The moments when the spotlight faded and he was just a boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, dreaming of a life he could barely imagine. He yearned for a song that would allow him to truly connect, to show a different side of himself, not the swaggering rock and roller, but the thoughtful, sensitive soul who often felt the weight of the world even amidst all his success. He wanted a song that wasn't just about fun, but about feeling. A song that would reach into the quiet corners of people's hearts, where the deepest feelings resided. The thought lingered in his mind as he finally drifted off to sleep, the faint echo of a melody he hadn't yet heard playing in the chambers of his restless heart. He didn't know it yet, but that melody, a quiet whisper against the roar of his fame, was closer than he thought. It was waiting, packed away in a brown envelope about to arrive with the morning mail. And it would challenge everything he knew about what a hit song truly was. The next morning, the Memphis heat was already rising, shimmering off the streets. Elvis was still in his pajamas, sipping coffee on the porch of Graceland, watching the dew burn off the grass. His cousin, Red West, brought out a stack of mail fan letters, mostly bundles of them, along with a few business envelopes. "Anything interesting, E?" Red asked, tossing a thicker, plain brown envelope onto Elvis's lap. It wasn't fancy. No official RCA logo, no famous publisher's name. Just a simple return address from a small town in rural Kentucky and a handwritten note, demo inside. "Hope you listen." Elvis usually had staff sort through these. So many aspiring songwriters sent him material, and most of it wasn't quite right, but something about this plain envelope caught his eye. Maybe it was the unpretentious handwriting. Or maybe it was just that restless feeling from the night before. Nagging at him, he tore open the envelope. Inside, carefully wrapped, was a small reel-to-reel tape, a standard demo taper, with lyrics typed neatly on it. The title caught his eye. "The Weeping Willow," we mused aloud. It sounded different, not like Hound Dog or Jailhouse Rock. He excused himself and headed to his private den, a cozy room filled with records and a good stereo system. He carefully threaded the tape onto the player. A faint hiss, then a simple acoustic guitar melody filled the room. No drums, no bass, just a guitar played gently and a woman's clear, soft voice. It wasn't a powerful voice, but it was honest, filled with a quiet sorrow. As the voice began to sing, Elvis sat down mesmerized beneath the weeping willow. "Where shadows softly creep, a lonely heart lies waiting. Secrets it does keep. The branches bend and whisper a sigh upon the breeze." The lyrics were simple, almost like a folk song, but they painted a vivid picture of loneliness and unspoken sadness. It spoke of a quiet, enduring pain that Elvis recognized. Not the dramatic, heartbroken pain of a rock and roll ballad, but a deeper, more universal ache. Tears that fall like dewdrops from eyes that loved and lost are gathered by the river, no matter what the cost. And still the willow watches as years go drifting by, a silent, faithful witness to every lonely sigh. Elvis closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. He could hear the steel guitar weeping alongside the vocal, the gentle strumming like a comforting hand. It wasn't sad in a way that made you want to cry, but in a way that made you feel understood. It resonated with that restless feeling. He'd had that quiet yearning for something deeper. He imagined his voice on the track could add so much to it, the depth, the emotion, the raw power that lay beneath his usual swagger. Could take this quiet sorrow and make it resonate in millions of homes. He could turn the woman's gentle ache into a universal testament to the human heart. When the song ended, the silence in the room felt heavy, profound. Elvis sat there for a long moment, lost in thought. This was it. This was the kind of song he'd been searching for. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't upbeat. It wouldn't make anyone jump and jive, but it had truth, it had soul, it had a heart. He rewound the tape and played it again, this time following along with the lyrics on the paper. He started humming along, then quietly singing, trying out different inflections, imagining how his voice would give the words new life. He could hear the arrangement forming in his head, a delicate piano, a mournful steel guitar, maybe some soft strings to swell with the emotion, but still keeping it simple, letting the lyrics and the melody shine. Not primarily. It was about touching lives. It was about proving that music could be more than just entertainment. It could be comfort. It could be understanding. A wave of excitement washed over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced with his music in a while. This was real. This was what he truly wanted to sing. He knew deep in his gut that this song, The Weeping Willow, was special. And he knew just as deeply that getting it recorded, let alone released, as a single would be a fight. But for this song, he was ready to fight. He picked up the phone, a determined glint in his eye. His first calling to be an easy conversation. The phone call to Colonel Parker was exactly as Elvis expected. A brick wall disguised as a human being. A ballad, Elvis. The colonel's voice boomed through the receiver, even across town. About a weeping willow, son. People want to dance. They want all shook up. They want jailhouse rock. This sounds like something your grandma would listen to on a Sunday afternoon, Elvis tried to explain. Colonel, listen to it. It's got soul. It's different. It's got a deep feeling, you know, something real. Real? Real is selling records, son. Real is keeping you on top. What's real about a tree crying? Colonel chuckled, a sound that always grated on Elvis's nerves. No, Elvis. We stick to the winning formula. Upbeat, catchy. A little bit of that hip-shaking magic. That's what sells. Elvis hung up, frustrated but not surprised. He knew the colonel's way of thinking. It was all about business, about the bottom line, about marketability. Artistry often took a backseat to sales figures. Undeterred, Elvis decided to take matters into his own hands. He called Scotty Moore and Bill Black, asking them to come over. He wanted them to hear it, to feel what he felt. When they arrived, he put on the demo tape of The Weeping Willow. Scotty, usually so expressive, listened with a thoughtful expression. Bill tapped his foot lightly, but it wasn't the usual rock and roll rhythm. When the song finished, silence filled the room. Well, Elvis prompted. It's quiet, real quiet. Not like our usual stuff. It's sad, Bill added, a touch hesitantly. Folks expect you to be, you know, happy or love-struck. Not this kind of sad. But don't you hear the beauty in it? Elvis pressed. Don't you feel it? It's honest people feel sad sometimes, Scotty. They feel lonely. This song, it understands that it's like a comfort. Scotty nodded slowly. I hear what you mean, E. Your voice on this, it could really make it sing, even sad as it is. But the radio, the label, they might not go for it. That was the next hurdle. RCA Records. If the colonel was skeptical, the record executives would be even more so. They were even more tied to market research and what was safe. A few days later, Elvis found himself in a meeting with Colonel Parker and a couple of RCA executives, Mr. Harrison and Mr. Jenkins, in a plush New York office. The air conditioning was blasting, but the tension in the room was palpable. Elvis, despite the colonel's earlier dismissal, had insisted on playing them The Weeping Willow. He even sang a few lines for them, just to give them a taste of what he could do with it. Mr. Harrison, a man with a stern face and thin lips, steepled his fingers. Elvis, your talent is undeniable. You are our biggest star, a phenomenon. And that's precisely why we need to be careful. Your fans, they expect a certain sound. They want to dance. They want excitement. This song is too introspective, Mr. Jenkins chimed in, adjusting his tie. Too slow. It doesn't have the driving beat, the energy that has made you a household name. The Weeping Willow. It's a beautiful piece for sure. A fine album track, perhaps, but not a single, not a hit. But that's exactly why it could be a hit, Elvis argued, his voice rising, a flicker of his famous temper showing. It's different. It shows another side of me, and another side of what music can do. Not everything has to be loud and flashy. Sometimes the quiet songs, the ones that reach deep inside. The colonel cleared his throat. Elvis has a point about showing versatility, gentlemen. Perhaps for an album buried deep, as Mr. Jenkins suggested. He shot Elvis a warning glance. But for a single? Absolutely not. It would confuse the public. It would risk your brand. Elvis felt a familiar frustration boiling up. My brand is my voice, Colonel, and my heart. This song, it's from my heart. It's honest. Honest doesn't always sell millions, son, Mr. Harrison said, his voice flat. Sales are about what people think they want, not necessarily what they need. They talked in circles for what felt like hours. Elvis felt like he was banging his head against a brick wall. They kept repeating the same phrases. Too sad, too slow, not commercial, risked to your image. Finally, a compromise was reluctantly offered. More to appease Elvis than out of any real belief in the song. All right, Elvis, Colonel Parker conceded, seeing the stubborn fire in his star's eyes. We'll let you record it, but it'll be a B-side, or if it makes it onto an album, it'll be a deep cut, not promoted. You can record it, but that's as far as it goes. Elvis knew it was a meager victory. A B-side meant it would likely be forgotten, overshadowed by the A-side's upbeat energy. But it was a foot in the door, a chance he would record the Weeping Willow. And once he did, once he poured his soul into it, he believed, truly believed, that people would hear it and they would listen. He might be battling the entire music industry, but Elvis Presley wasn't one to back down when he believed in something. Especially when that something was a song that spoke to his very soul. Elvis returned to Memphis, the lukewarm permission to record the Weeping Willow weighing on him a B-side. A deep cut. It felt like a small grudging bone thrown to a persistent dog. But it was a chance, and he clung to that. The next few days were a whirlwind of studio sessions for other more commercial tracks. The Colonel was pushing for a fast turnaround on a new album, filled with the upbeat, marketable songs they all expected from Elvis. But in between, takes during lunch breaks or late at night, Elvis kept returning to the Weeping Willow. He listened to the demo, hummed the melody, and refined how he wanted to approach it. He knew he had to convince his musicians too, not just the executives. Scotty Bill DJ and the other session players were professionals, but they were also his friends, his musical family. If they believed in it truly, that would make a difference. During a break from recording a particularly lively rockabilly tune, Elvis called Scotty and Bill over. Boys, remember that Weeping Willow song I played you? We're gonna record it. Scotty raised an eyebrow. Really? The Colonel actually gave the green light. Reluctantly, Elvis admitted with a wry smile. As a B-side or an album cut, but we're gonna record it. Like it's the A-side. Like it's the most important song we've ever done. He sat them down and played the demo again, but this time he didn't just listen. He sang along, his voice a rich, powerful counterpoint to the original demo singer. He didn't just sing the words, he felt them. He poured all the frustration, the longing, the quiet understanding he felt into the melody. See, he said when he finished, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. It's not just sad, it's truthful. Everyone knows what it feels like to be lonely sometimes, to have dreams that didn't quite work out this song. It doesn't try to fix it, it just understands. It sits with you. Scotty looked at Bill, then back at Elvis. When you sing it, it takes on a whole new life. It's got that thing you have. Yeah, Bill agreed. It ain't blue suede shoes, but it's got a punch in a different way. A punch to the gut. Exactly, Elvis exclaimed, leaning forward. We're gonna go into the studio and we're gonna play this from the heart. No tricks, no flash, just honest feeling. I want the instruments to whisper, to keen, to support the emotion, not to overpower it. They talked for a long time discussing instrumentation, the feel, the mood. Elvis wanted a delicate piano, intro, a mournful steel guitar, throughout, maybe some understated strings, but nothing too grand. He wanted it sparse, raw, vulnerable. He wanted every note to count, every word to carry weight. The band members, initially hesitant, began to catch his vision. They saw the passion in his eyes, the deep conviction in his voice. They knew Elvis had an instinct for music, a gut feeling that often proved right, even when the Colonel's spreadsheet said otherwise. We'll need to book some extra time, Scotty said, away from the main sessions, so the Colonel doesn't fuss too much. Elvis grinned. Consider it booked, and tell the engineers to keep it quiet. This is our little rebellion. It wasn't a loud, angry rebellion. It was a quiet one, fueled by artistry and a deep belief in the power of music. Elvis knew that if he could just get this song recorded the way he envisioned it, if he could pour his very soul into the vocals, it would find its way. It had to. He spent the next few days immersing himself in the song. He walked around Graceland, humming it, imagining the studio, the microphones, the way his voice would fill the space. He thought about all the letters he received from fans, the quiet stories they sometimes shared of their own struggles, their own heartaches. This song, he felt, was for them. It was a way to reach out beyond the dazzling lights and the screaming crowds and connect on a deeper, more human level. This was more than just another record. This was a statement about who Elvis Presley truly was underneath the layers of fame and expectation. He was ready to show the world his heart, even if it meant risking the very machine that had made him king. He knew the path forward wouldn't be easy, but his intuition, that deep, resonant knowing, told him it was the right one. And for a song like The Weeping Willow, that was all that mattered. The day arrived for recording The Weeping Willow. It was an evening session booked after the usual flurry of commercial takes under the pretense of experimenting with new sounds for future albums. This way, the Colonel wouldn't be breathing down their necks. The studio felt different that night. Usually there was a buzz, an excited chatter, the clang of instruments, the laughter of the band. Tonight it was quieter, almost reverent. The session musicians Elvis had assembled, Scotty on lead guitar, Bill on bass, DJ on drums, playing with brushes, not sticks, Floyd Kramer on piano, and a steel guitarist named Jimmy Day. Understood the mood. They knew this wasn't just another track. Elvis stepped into the vocal booth. The lyrics to The Weeping Willow clutched in his hand. He wasn't wearing his usual flashy stage clothes, just a simple shirt and slacks. He looked focused, intense. He had shed the king persona and was just a singer ready to bare his soul. "All right, boys," Elvis said over the intercom, his voice a little softer than usual. "Let's take it slow, Floyd. Give me that gentle intro, Jimmy. I want your steel to cry with me." Floyd Kramer nodded, his fingers dancing lightly on the piano keys. The melody began to fill the studio, soft and melancholic, like falling raindrops. Jimmy Day's steel guitar entered its notes, bending and wailing, a sound that truly captured the essence of weeping. Elvis took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to sing. "Beneath the weeping willow where shadows softly creep, a lonely heart lies waiting. Secrets it does keep." His voice wasn't the powerful roar of his rock and roll hits. It was tender, vulnerable, almost a whisper at first, but with an incredible depth of emotion. Every word was carefully articulated, steeped in feeling. He wasn't just singing, he was living the lyrics. Picture the lonely willow, the quiet sorrow, the hidden tears. He remembered moments of his own solitude, the times when the weight of fame felt heavy, when he missed home and simpler days. As the song progressed, the musicians, initially just playing their parts, found themselves increasingly drawn in. Scotty's guitar licks were subtle, weaving in and out of Elvis's vocal, never overpowering, always supporting. Bill's bass provided a quiet, steady foundation, like the earth beneath the willow. DJ's brushes on the drums created a soft, rustling sound like leaves in a gentle breeze. In the control booth, engineer Bob Harris, who had recorded hundreds of Elvis's songs, found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. He'd seen Elvis perform with incredible energy, but this was different, this was raw. This was the true artistry of the man shining through. The tears that fall like dewdrops from eyes that loved and lost are gathered by the river, no matter what the cost. Elvis's voice swelled here, not with volume, but with intensity. The emotion was palpable, a universal ache that transcended his own personal experiences. He reached a note holding it, letting it hang in the air, trembling slightly, before gently letting it fade. It was pure, unadulterated feeling. After the first take, a profound silence filled the studio. No one spoke for a full minute. Then Scotty picked up his guitar and strummed a thoughtful chord. "Man, he said softly. "That was something else." Bill nodded wide-eyed. "Gave me chills." DJ simply shook his head. A small something on his face. Elvis stepped out of the booth, a little out of breath, but a sense of peace settled over him. He knew he had given it his all. "Let's do one more," he said, "just to be sure. Let's really feel it." They did a second take, and it was even more powerful. The musicians were completely in sync with Elvis, their instruments weeping alongside his voice, creating a tapestry of beautiful sorrow. There were no false notes, no forced emotions. It was real. It was honest. When the final note faded, the room remained quiet for a long moment. The echo of the steel guitar still lingering in the air. Bob Ferris finally broke the silence, his voice a little husky. "That's it, Elvis. We got it. That's a keeper." Elvis listened to the playback, a rare, satisfied smile on his face. He knew he had captured it. He had poured his heart and soul into the Weeping Willow. It might not be the commercial hit the Colonel wanted. It might get buried on a B-side, but he knew deep down that this song had a power all its own. It wasn't about selling records. It was about connecting, and he had a feeling that somehow it would find its way to the hearts of the people who needed to hear it most. He had done his part. Now the song had to do its own work. Weeks turned into months. The new album, titled Rockin' Romance, a name Elvis privately found a bit cheesy, was being prepared for release. As promised or threatened, The Weeping Willow was relegated to the B-side of the lead single, a lively, upbeat track called Twist and Shout All Night. It was a classic. Elvis rocker, designed for immediate radio play and dance floor action. Elvis tried not to feel disappointed. He knew this was the deal. Still, seeing The Weeping Willow listed as the flip side, almost an afterthought, stung a little. Colonel was ecstatic about Twist and Shout All Night, predicting it would be his biggest hit yet. RCA sent out promotional copies to radio stations, focusing entirely on the A-side. There was no mention of The Weeping Willow in any press releases or advertising. The single was released in late autumn. Twist and Shout All Night immediately jumped up the charts. Radios across the country danced to its catchy beat. Elvis was on top of the world officially, but behind the scenes Elvis felt a quiet unease. He knew the song on the other side of the record was special, profound, and it was being ignored. He listened to the radio, hoping, just hoping, to catch a glimpse of The Weeping Willow. He never did. D-Jazz would play Twist and Shout All Night, maybe a few other upbeat tracks from his new album, but they never flipped the record. Critics reviewed Rockin' Romance and mostly praised its energetic tracks, confirming Elvis's status as the king of rock and roll. Some barely mentioned The Weeping Willow, calling it a moody ballad or a departure that doesn't quite fit. Others dismissed it as too somber for the vibrant sound of Elvis Presley. "See, son?" The Colonel chuckled over the phone one day. Maybe he was just being sentimental. Maybe the Colonel and the executives were right. Maybe people just wanted escapism, not reflection. The music industry was a machine, and he was a cog in it, albeit a very important one. He found himself retreating more often to his music room at Graceland, playing The Weeping Willow on his own turntable. He'd sit in the dim light, listening to his own voice, to the delicate piano and the mournful steel guitar. It still moved him. It still felt right. But why wasn't it reaching anyone else? He started receiving fan mail again. Hundreds of letters. Most were about his latest upbeat hits, expressing excitement, asking for autographs. But every now and then he'd find a letter, usually from someone a little older or someone who wrote with a different tone. They'd mention an album track, maybe a lesser-known one, and how it had touched him, but never the Weeping Willow. He started to lose a little hope. The song, his quiet rebellion, seemed destined to remain a hidden gem known only to himself and the musicians who had helped him record it. It was a shame, he thought, a real shame, because he knew with every fiber of his being that there were people out there who needed to hear that song, people who felt lonely, who felt misunderstood, who carried their own quiet sorrows. He just wished there was a way to get it to them, a way to bypass the labels, the DS, the critics, and just let the music speak for itself. He didn't know how, but he held on to that faint glimmer of hope, like a tiny spark in a vast dark forest. He truly believed that a song once born had a life of its own. It just needed someone to find it. Miles away from Memphis, in a small town in Ohio, a young woman named Clara worked the late-night shift at the local radio station. Prey loved music more than anything. She loved the big hits, sure, but she also loved finding hidden gems. Songs that weren't being played everywhere else. She found solace in music, especially when life felt tough. One evening, sifting through a pile of new singles sent by RCA, she saw Twist and Shout All Night by Elvis Presley at Studio. She scanned the song list for his new album, and it was barely mentioned. Most stations probably just played the A-side and sent the record back, but something about the title intrigued her. Clara had recently gone through a tough time herself, losing her grandmother who she'd been very close to. Pain was still fresh, a quiet ache in her heart that upbeat songs couldn't quite touch. "What the heck?" she muttered to herself. "Let's give it a listen." She carefully queued up the Weeping Willow. The gentle piano intro filled the small studio, followed by the mournful cry of the steel guitar. Then, Elvis's voice came in soft, vulnerable, utterly unlike the swaggering rock and roller. She knew beneath the Weeping Willow, where shadows softly creep, secrets it does keep. Clara stopped. Everything. She leaned forward, captivated. The song resonated deep within her. It wasn't about a specific event, but the universal feeling of quiet sorrow, of carrying a burden unseen by others. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It was exactly what she, and probably many others, needed to hear. As the song continued, her eyes welled up. It felt like Elvis himself was sitting beside her, whispering understanding into her ear. This wasn't the king on stage. This was a soul singing from his own depths to hers. When the last note faded, Clara didn't immediately move. She took a deep, shaky breath. "Wow," she whispered. "Just wow." She knew her station manager wouldn't approve. He was all about the top 40, about playing what was popular, but Clara couldn't help herself. She felt compelled to share this song. She expected a few curious calls, maybe none, but within minutes the phone lines lit up. The first caller, a woman in her 50s, was crying. "Oh, my dear," she sobbed, "I lost my husband last year. This song, It's Like It, was written just for me. It understands. Thank you for playing it, thank you." The next caller was a young man, a Vietnam veteran. His voice rough. "That song, it just got to me. Been feeling real low since I got back. Like nobody gets it but that song, yeah. Play it again, will ya?" And then another, and another. People weren't just calling. They were pouring out their hearts. They talked about lost loves, about loneliness, about unspoken grief, about struggles they thought no one else understood. The Weeping Willow wasn't just a song, it was a companion, a silent witness to their hidden pains. Clara kept playing it night after night, sometimes twice in an hour, due to popular demand. Other local stations, hearing the buzz, started to follow suit. Then a regional station picked it up. The phone lines at RCA, usually reserved for industry calls, started ringing with calls from everyday people, asking about that sad Elvis song. Letters started arriving at Graceland again, but these were different. They weren't just fan letters, they were testimonies. "Dear Mr. Presley," one woman wrote, her handwriting shaky. "I heard the Weeping Willow on the radio last night. I haven't cried like that in years, not since my little girl passed. But it wasn't a sad cry. It was a healing cry. Thank you for singing what was in my heart." Elvis sat on his couch, surrounded by these new letters. He read them one after another, his eyes wide. He saw the addresses: small towns, rural communities, places far from the bright lights of Hollywood and New York. These were the people he sang for. These were the hearts he wanted to touch. A profound sense of vindication mixed with humility washed over him. He had known it. He had known this song had a purpose. It had found its way not through the powerful machinery of the music industry, but through a quiet whisper from one heart to another. The spark in the silence had ignited. The phenomenon of the Weeping Willow began to spread like wildfire, not through traditional channels, but by word of mouth, by heartfelt requests, and by the sheer emotional power of the song itself. It was an organic grassroots movement that baffled the music industry. First, it was Clara's small Ohio station. Then, other local stations in the Midwest, noticing the surge in listener calls and letters, cautiously added it to their rotation. They'd play Twist and Shout all night, and then, due to popular demand, flip the record to The Weeping Willow. Slowly but surely, the B-side was getting more airplay than the A-side. RCA executives, initially dismissive, started to receive alarming reports. Sales of the single were climbing, but not because of Twist and Shout all night. Sales were climbing because people were asking for the record with the Weeping Willow song. Record store owners reported customers specifically requesting the B-side. Colonel Parker, always one to follow the money, was bewildered. "This makes no sense, Elvis," he grumbled over the phone. "This sad song, this dirge, it's selling records like hotcakes." "How?" Elvis just smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. "Because, Colonel, it's honest." The major radio stations in New York and Los Angeles, initially resistant to playing anything but upbeat chart toppers, eventually capitulated to overwhelming public demand. Letters and telegrams flooded their offices. Callers jammed their phone lines, begging for the Elvis song about the tree. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The people wanted the Weeping Willow. Within weeks, the Weeping Willow started its improbable climb on the Billboard charts. It was an anomaly, a B-side unpromoted. A too sad song was defying every industry rule. It nudged its way into the top 40, then the top 20. The media, initially focused on Elvis's rock and roll image, started reporting on the unlikely hit. Articles appeared in magazines and newspapers, questioning how a melancholic ballad could outsell upbeat dance tunes. They featured stories of fans, ordinary people who shared how the song had touched them. A Story in Life magazine featured a photograph of a young woman clutching a copy of the Twist and Shout all night single, her finger pointing at the B-side label with the caption, "America's new favorite song is the one they were never meant to hear." Elvis found himself giving interviews where reporters asked him about the Weeping Willow more than his other hits. He spoke about his belief in the song, about wanting to sing something that truly resonated with people's deeper emotions. He talked about the raw honesty of the lyrics and the comfort he hoped it brought. He held on to the letters he'd received, rereading them often. A letter from a soldier overseas who said the song reminded him of home and helped him cope with loneliness. A note from a nurse who said she played it for her patients, and it brought them peace. A simple card from a grieving mother who said it helped her feel less alone. This wasn't just fame. It was something far more profound. This was connection. One evening, Elvis was sitting at home watching the evening news. The anchor, usually reporting on politics or crime, ended the broadcast with a story about the Weeping Willow. He showed a clip of a radio DJ who explained how his station was inundated with requests. He talked about how the song offered solace in an often turbulent world. Then the anchor said, "And this week, defying all expectations, the Weeping Willow has officially reached #1 on the national charts." A testament, perhaps, to the power of a quiet, honest song to move the hearts of a nation. Elvis stared at the television screen, a lump forming in his throat. #1. His Too Sad song, the one no one wanted him to record, the one buried on a B-side, was the biggest song in the country. It wasn't about the charts anymore, or the sales. It was about something far greater. It was about the simple, undeniable truth of music. It was about the people, the quiet, ordinary people, who had found solace and understanding in his voice. And it was the most heartwarming victory he had ever known. The news that the Weeping Willow had hit #1 sent ripples throughout the entire music industry. RCA executives, initially baffled, were now scrambling to understand how this anomaly had occurred. They held meetings, analyzing data, trying to replicate the success, but they couldn't. It wasn't a formula. It was an authentic connection. Colonel Parker, still somewhat perplexed, was nevertheless thrilled by the financial success. "Well, Elvis," he admitted, a rare moment of concession in his booming voice, "I'll be a monkey's uncle. You were right about this one, it seems. Folks do want to cry with a tree sometimes." He still didn't quite get why, but he got the results. For Elvis, the triumph wasn't about the chart position, though that was certainly sweet validation. It was about the profound impact the song had on people's lives. The letters poured in, truckloads of them now, from every corner of the country and beyond. He spent hours reading them, often late into the night, tears sometimes welling in his own eyes. A letter from a young woman who had lost her fiancé in an accident, writing that the song was the only thing that made her feel understood. A man who had battled depression for years, saying, "The Weeping Willow finally gave words to his silent pain, helping him feel less alone." A family who had been fractured by loss, finding common ground and comfort listening to it together. One particularly moving letter came from a chaplain at a hospital, thanking Elvis for a song that brought peace to dying patients. They listened to it, the chaplain wrote, and a quiet calm seems to settle over them. "It's a testament to the comforting power of your voice, Mr. Presley, and the universal truth of that melody." Elvis realized that music wasn't just entertainment, it was a form of healing. It was a bridge between souls. His rock and roll songs brought joy and excitement, made people forget their troubles for a while. But the Weeping Willow did something deeper. It acknowledged their troubles, sat with them, and offered a gentle, comforting embrace. He saw the song performed on television variety shows by other artists trying to capture its magic. But none of them had the raw emotion, the vulnerability that Elvis had poured into his own recording. He knew he had tapped into something primal, something universal, that only he could express in that way. The choker of the Weeping Willow. A quiet woman named Eleanor Vance from Kentucky also saw her life transformed. She received royalties she could only have dreamed of, but more importantly, she received letters from people thanking her for the words. She spoke of how Elvis's voice had given her song wings, taking her quiet personal melody and making it a shared experience for millions. Elvis felt a new sense of purpose in his career. It wasn't just about selling records or maintaining his superstar image anymore. It was about finding songs that spoke to the human condition, songs that offered solace, understanding, and connection. He had always been intuitive, driven by feeling rather than strict logic, and the Weeping Willow proved his intuition right in the most powerful way possible. It also shifted his relationship While the Colonel remained business-minded, he now had a grudging respect for Elvis's artistic instincts. He might not always understand it, but he couldn't argue with a #1 hit, driven purely by public demand. He was a shrewd businessman, and he recognized that sometimes authenticity was the most valuable commodity of all. For Elvis, it was a quiet triumph, not the screaming, flashing lights kind of triumph, but a deeply personal, fulfilling one. He had stood his ground, trusted his gut, and delivered a piece of his soul to the world. And in return, the world had embraced it, proving that even in the most popular of artists, people crave genuine human connection. The king had shown his heart, and the hearts of millions had responded in kind. Years passed, but the Weeping Willow never faded from the public's memory. It became more than just a hit song. It became a timeless classic, a cornerstone of Elvis Presley's legendary repertoire, often requested during his concerts. When he performed it live, a hush would fall over the audience. The usual screaming and hysterics would subside, replaced by a quiet reverence. You could see people wiping away tears, holding hands, or simply staring at the stage, lost in the raw emotion of the song. It became a powerful moment in his shows, a testament to his versatility and the depth of his artistry. He would often introduce it by saying, "This is a song some folks didn't want me to record, said it was too sad. But you know what? Sometimes a little sadness shared can be the most comforting thing of all." And the crowd would roar, not with excitement, but with understanding, a deep collective sigh of agreement. The Weeping Willow solidified Elvis's reputation, not just as a dramatic performer, but as an artist capable of profound emotional expression. It opened doors for him to explore more introspective material in later years, songs that showed a different facet of his complex personality. He learned that true connection with his audience wasn't always about the spectacle. Sometimes it was about vulnerability. He never forgot the lessons learned from that Too Sad song. It taught him to trust his inner voice, even when the loudest voices around him disagreed. It taught him that his art had a purpose beyond entertainment. It could offer solace, understanding, and a sense of shared humanity. Graceland remained a hub of activity, but now, among the fan letters and business deals, there was a steady stream of correspondence specifically about the Weeping Willow. People continued to share their stories, their quiet moments of connection with the song. Elvis kept them all a precious collection of testimonials to the song's enduring power. He would sometimes sit by the real Weeping Willow tree on the grounds of Graceland, strumming his guitar, a quiet smile on his face. He thought of Eleanor Vance, the no-cur whose humble demo had sparked this whole journey. He thought of Clara, the small-town DJ who had dared to play it. And he thought of all the countless faces in the crowd, all the individual hearts who had found a little piece of themselves in his voice. The story of the Weeping Willow became a legendary tale in the music industry. A reminder that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the greatest victories. It was a story about authenticity, about the courage to be vulnerable, and about the incredible, often surprising ways that music can touch the human soul. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, continued to captivate the world with his electrifying performances and groundbreaking hits. But deep down, he carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had also given the world the Weeping Willow, a song that didn't make them dance, but made them feel deeply and truly. And in doing so, he had etched a legacy, not just in rock and roll history, but in the hearts of millions, forever proving the heartwarming power of a song that dared to be sad. His heart felt deeply fulfilled, understanding that he was not just an entertainer, but a conduit for something truly beautiful and enduring.